500 drones. In a single day. Not spread across a week, but in a single day. Not spread across a month. In one day. One day. Day. And here's the part that should make you stop in your tracks. The majority of them weren't aimed at military targets. They were aimed at places where people live, eat, sleep, and send their children to school. But that's not the most important story here today. While Russia is flooding Ukrainian skies with an unprecedented wave of drones and missiles, something is happening on the ground that completely contradicts everything you think you know about how this war is going. It's something the headlines buried. The data makes it impossible to ignore. Russia, the military that steamrolled through 319 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in January alone, captured just 23 square kilometers in March. 23? That's not a slowdown. It's a collapse. What is the reason behind it? It's not just Ukraine pushing back. Russia is sabotaging its own army, and we're going to show you exactly how. Stay with us. This one is worth your full attention. Let's start with what happened on the ground, because it's important to understand the scale of these attacks, not just summarize them. In the eastern Ukrainian city of Nikopol, for example, a Russian drone struck a crowded market directly. Not a military installation, not a radar station. It was a market where ordinary people were buying groceries, running errands, and living their lives. 5 of those people are now dead. 19 others were wounded. Among the injured is a teenager whose condition remains critical at the time of recording. That single strike would be devastating enough on its own, but it was just one small part of a much larger, meticulously coordinated attack. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that Russia had launched over 500 drones and dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles in a single day. Ukrainian air defenses managed to intercept 260 of those drones, which is an impressive feat by any military standard. However, the drones that made it through did not hit weapons depots or command centers. They hit homes, hospitals, schools, markets, people. At least 14 people were killed across Ukraine in this single attack. Dozens more were wounded. These aren't just statistics. These are real people with real families who woke up that morning with no idea that it would be their last. City by city, because the scale of this matters. In Kyiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, which is located just 30 miles from the Russian border, at least 2 people were killed and more than 24 were wounded in missile, bomb, and drone attacks over a 24-hour period. Kyiv has been one of the most relentlessly targeted cities throughout this entire war, and yet its people remain. They adapt, they endure, but the toll keeps rising. In Sumy, in northern Ukraine, a drone hit a 16-story residential building. 16 stories. This is not a military compound. This is where families live, where children do their homework, and where elderly residents sit by their windows. At least 7 people were injured in the attack. Near Kyiv, widely circulated video footage captured the moment a Russian drone hit an apartment complex in Obukiv. You can see the impact, you can see the fireball. You're viscerally and unavoidably reminded that this is not a simulation. This is someone's home. This was someone's life. In the wider Kyiv region, missiles landed near a kindergarten and a school. Buildings were damaged, homes nearby were destroyed. Emergency workers moved through the rubble looking for survivors. In a veterinary clinic in Chobani, around 20 animals were killed in a strike. Staff rushed to the scene to rescue whatever they could. Although it sounds almost surreal, this speaks to something deeply important. In this aerial campaign, nothing is off limits. Absolutely nothing. So why is Russia escalating its strikes on civilian areas right now? There are 3 theories that keep coming up in analyst circles, and they're all worth considering. The first is psychological exhaustion. By consistently targeting residential areas, markets, kindergartens, and schools, Russia is sending a message to the Ukrainian people, not the Ukrainian military. The message is that the cost of resistance is too high. Nowhere is safe. Give up. This strategy is as old as modern warfare itself. Break the will of the population, and the military will eventually follow. The second aspect is infrastructure degradation. Even when a drone misses its primary target or lands in a residential neighborhood near an energy facility, the cumulative effect is enormous. This weakens Ukraine's ability to power its cities, heat its homes, run its hospitals, and maintain its functioning economy. It's a slow, grinding strategy designed to make the country ungovernable from within. The third theory, and perhaps the most unsettling, is that civilian casualties in this campaign are not collateral damage. They are the intended outcome. Terrorizing the civilian population is not a side effect of the strategy. It is the strategy itself. Whatever the reasoning, the reality on the ground doesn't change. Ukrainian civilians are experiencing a level of violence that most outside observers can barely begin to comprehend. Now, here's the part of the story that the data makes impossible to ignore. While Russia's aerial campaign is intensifying, something almost paradoxical is happening on the ground. This is where the numbers become genuinely extraordinary. New data from the Institute for the Study of War, one of the most respected and rigorous organizations tracking this war in real time, reveals that Russia's forces recorded their smallest territorial gains in over 2.5 years of full-scale warfare in March of this year. Across the entire front line, from the northern sectors near Kharkiv to the southern coast, the Russian army captured only 23 square kilometers of territory in March. In certain areas, Russia didn't just stall. It actually lost ground. Ukrainian counteroffensives pushed Russian forces back, meaning the front line moved in Ukraine's favor. Now compare that to January. In January, Russian forces seized 319 square kilometers. This represents a reduction in territorial gains of almost 93% over just 2 months. Russia went from capturing an area the size of a major urban footprint every month to capturing an area roughly the size of a small town over the course of a whole month. This is not a slowdown. It is a near total collapse of ground momentum. Where is Ukraine pushing back, and how effectively? The most significant counteroffensive activity has been concentrated in the south, particularly in the strategic corridor between the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The numbers here are striking. In January, Russian-occupied territory in the southern area amounted to around 400 square kilometers. By the end of March, just 8 weeks later, this figure had fallen to 144 square kilometers. Ukraine reclaimed over 250 square kilometers of territory in that single corridor in 2 months. This is not a minor tactical adjustment. It is a substantial battlefield reversal. It shows that despite the drone barrages and missile strikes on its cities, Ukraine's military is still capable of organized, disciplined, and effective counteroffensive operations. This sends a significant message about the state of Ukrainian military capability heading into the second quarter of this year. Now, here's the part that nobody is talking about enough, and frankly, it might be the most remarkable detail in this entire story. Russia's ground war isn't just being slowed by Ukrainian resistance. It's also being slowed down by Russia itself. The Kremlin has banned the use of Starlink terminals among Russian soldiers. Starlink, the satellite internet system developed by SpaceX, has become a vital tool for communication and battlefield coordination in this war, and is used by both sides. Despite international sanctions, Russia found ways to acquire these terminals through back channels. However, Moscow has now moved to restrict their use among its own frontline troops. At the same time, and this is where it becomes hard to believe, Russia has imposed restrictions on Telegram, the messaging app. Russian soldiers have relied on it as their primary real-time communication platform on the front line throughout this entire war. Unit commanders share battlefield intelligence on it. Soldiers coordinate troop movements through it. It's used for everything from operational planning to simply alerting fellow troops about enemy positions. By restricting access to Telegram, Russia has, whether intentionally or through sheer bureaucratic dysfunction, degraded its own battlefield communication network. ISW analysts are explicit about this, stating that it is a direct contributing factor to the collapse in Russian ground advances. After all, an army that cannot communicate cannot coordinate, and an army that cannot coordinate cannot advance. 4 years into the most significant land war in Europe since World War II, Russia is hampering its own military efforts. That is the underlying story. Let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture, because context is extremely important here. Russia currently occupies just over 19% of Ukrainian territory. This includes the Crimean Peninsula, which was annexed in 2014, as well as large parts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and parts of the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. This is a significant amount of land. Millions of Ukrainian citizens are currently living under Russian military occupation. However, the context that changes everything is that Russia launched this invasion with the stated goal of capturing Kyiv within days. Its original war plan assumed the collapse of the Ukrainian government and the rapid subjugation of the entire country, which the West would then be forced to accept. Instead, 4 years later, Russia controls just 19% of Ukraine, and that percentage is now shrinking. 2025 began with genuine Russian momentum. January saw the capture of 319 square kilometers. February saw continued pressure across multiple sectors. However, the first quarter of 2025 as a whole shows that Russian battlefield gains are running at roughly half the rate of the same period in 2024. The trajectory is unmistakable. The momentum is moving in the wrong direction for Moscow, and the Kremlin is aware of this. This brings us to the diplomatic dimension, because this war is being fought on multiple fronts simultaneously. Ahead of Easter, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky proposed a ceasefire, a mutual halt to strikes on energy infrastructure over the holiday period. It was a limited, targeted pause. It was a humanitarian gesture. Russia responded by launching 500 drones and dozens of missiles. This response speaks volumes about where Moscow's strategic calculus currently stands. They are not interested in pauses. They are not interested in gestures of goodwill that could be interpreted as weakness. The aerial escalation is deliberate and calculated, and is intensifying. In diplomatic news, Zelensky traveled to Ankara to meet with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss security cooperation. Turkey is one of the few countries to have maintained active diplomatic channels with both Kyiv and Moscow throughout the conflict, a genuinely unusual position. The meeting was timed to take place just 1 day after Erdogan had spoken directly with Vladimir Putin. During that conversation, Putin accused Ukraine of planning to attack a major gas pipeline running between Russia and Central Asia, a pipeline which also supplies natural gas to several European countries. This is a familiar move from Moscow's diplomatic playbook, to frame Ukrainian military activity as a direct threat to European energy security, and use this framing to pressure European governments into limiting their support for Kyiv. So, where does all this leave us? Here is the honest, unvarnished picture. Ukraine is under enormous and escalating air pressure. The drone and missile campaign is intensifying, not abating. Civilian infrastructure is being systematically and deliberately targeted. The human cost is mounting daily, and yet Russia's ground campaign is stalling in a way that few analysts predicted at the start of this year. The alarming territorial momentum seen in January has effectively collapsed. Ukraine is not only holding the line, but also counterattacking and winning back ground in key sectors. Russia is partially responsible for its own slowdown. Internal policy decisions, such as the ban on Starlink and the restrictions on Telegram, are undermining Russian battlefield effectiveness in ways that no Ukrainian weapon has managed to achieve. This is a remarkable and deeply revealing development. Diplomatically, however, the situation remains unresolved and deeply uncertain. Ceasefire proposals are met with escalation. Back-channel talks continue through intermediaries. The international community is watching to see if the first quarter of 2025 will represent a genuine and lasting turning point, or if it will simply be a pause before the next major Russian offensive. This war has now entered its fourth year. The people of Ukraine, those living in Nikopol, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Kyiv, do not have the luxury of watching this unfold from a distance. They are living through it every day, every single day. The skies are growing increasingly dangerous. The ground is shifting. Analysts, generals, diplomats. The question that no one has been able to answer definitively yet is, which of these two trends will determine what happens next? We'll keep watching. We'll keep reporting. See you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more content like this. See you in the next video. Goodbye.